Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into a government plan that was supposed to be a brilliant financial masterstroke, but it ended up spiraling into a massive, multi-billion-dollar problem for the country.
So check this out. The government rolled out this scheme to save some cash on its borrowing. But as you can see, the reality is, well, it's the exact opposite. They now owe investors more than double the money they originally brought in. So the big question is, how did this happen?
It's a huge question, right? And to really get our heads around what went wrong, we need to rewind the clock a bit and see how this whole thing got started in the first place.
All right, so let's go back to 2015. The Indian government was wrestling with two pretty big financial headaches that it really wanted to solve.
See, on one hand, the country's huge appetite for physical gold was putting a serious strain on its foreign currency reserves. But on the other hand, the government needed to borrow money, and the interest rates were just too high. So they came up with this really innovative product designed to, kill two birds with one stone, the sovereign gold bond.
So what exactly is a sovereign gold bond, and why did it become such an instant hit with investors? Let's break it down.
Okay, so in simple terms, this lets you invest in gold without all the fuss of buying and storing physical bars or coins. So instead of having your gold just sit in a locker somewhere, the government would basically borrow its value from you. And they'd even pay you a little extra for the favor. For investors, this deal was honestly almost too good to be true.
And this is where it gets really interesting. I mean, just look at this deal. You got all the upside of gold's rising price. On top of that, you get a guaranteed cash payment every single year. You didn't have to worry about storage or security, and here's the kicker. If you held onto it for the full 8 years, your profits were completely tax-free. It was an absolutely unbeatable combination that made these bonds a massive, massive hit. So, what could possibly go wrong?
Well, as it turns out, the success of the entire scheme hinged on one critical thing. The price of gold had to behave in a pretty predictable way. It did not.
As you can see from this timeline here, the plan actually worked just fine for the first few years. But then, right around 2020, this perfect storm of global events, especially all the economic uncertainty that followed the COVID-19 pandemic, it sent investors everywhere flocking to the safety of gold, and that caused its price to just surge.
And this chart right here, this just perfectly illustrates the core of the problem. While the government was paying out this tiny 2.5% interest rate each year, the actual value of the gold it had promised to pay back was just skyrocketing. A loan that was supposed to be cheap had suddenly turned incredibly expensive.
And that brings us to this staggering figure, 1.5 Lakh Crore Rupees. That's 1.5 trillion rupees. This is the government's estimated liability on these bonds today, a number so huge it represents about 0.4% of India's entire GDP.
So when you look at the final math, the sheer scale of this miscalculation becomes crystal clear. Let's see just how these numbers stack up.
Okay, so here's the crucial point. The government raised about 72,000 crore rupees from the scheme. But because of that explosion in gold prices, it now owes investors more than double that amount. Think about it. For every single rupee it borrowed, it now has to pay back more than 2.
Faced with this ballooning debt, the government had to hit the brakes, and hit them hard. They've stopped issuing any new bonds and are even trying to buy back the old ones early just to stop the bleeding. But was it a total failure? Well, not exactly. The scheme did manage to cut down on physical gold demand by about 10 to 12%, which did save the country billions in foreign currency. The real question is, was that savings worth taking on this massive new debt?
And ultimately, as this quote really highlights, the plan's intentions were solid. It was a creative solution to some very real problems. But it was completely blindsided by the one thing that nobody can control, a volatile global market.
And all of this leaves us with a really critical question. This whole situation is a powerful reminder that in the world of finance, even the smartest, most well-intentioned plans can be totally upended by forces nobody can predict. And it forces us to ask a fundamental question. When governments try to innovate like this, who should ultimately be carrying the risk when the markets just don't play along?